Scott McCrea, welcome back to Suit Up the Podcast.
Happy birthday, Terrence.
Happy birthday to you also.
Yeah,
Uh,
we're right like days apart from one another. Um, Years not that close, but days were just days apart from one another.
I always do think it's fun with that. I have a little brother whose birthday is exactly 6 days ahead of mine. And
Ah,
so
okay.
we're always like right within that week, but several years apart. And then I grew up with a friend. She was born the day before me, 1 year later. So she was
Oh, wow.
364 days younger than me. And as
And
per
catching up
happens,
ever since.
catching up ever since. Oh dear goodness,
Yeah,
that
I
moment
share a
I'm like,
birthday with the French Revolution, and it's been
oh,
downhill ever since. And
yes.
yes, I should tell you up front, I had nothing to do with the French Revolution.
Mhm.
No matter what they tell you, I was not there.
I was actually just talking about the Scarlet Pimpernel yesterday, which I think is at some point be fun to do like a bracket. What is the do a vote? Which is the more classic French Revolution book, The Scarlet Pimpernel or A Tale of Two Cities? I think A Tale of
Oh,
Two
Scarlet
Cities would
Pimpernel.
win, but by popular
Yeah,
understanding, not because which is the better book. The better book is obviously Scarlet Pimpernel.
yeah,
We are
yeah.
not here to talk about the Scarlet Pimpernel of all things, but to celebrate our birthdays. We are talking about a movie which I did not realize how much I need in my life. And Scott, you were like, "Oh, if you're talking about this movie, I want to be on the show." The Rocketeer.
It is one of my has been ever since it's come out. It's been consistently one of my three favorite movies. And my better half will tell you that watching The Rocketeer is like lifting my skull, a disgusting image. It's like lifting my skull and looking inside of my head because it's exactly the way I think. I don't watch this movie. I sort of snort it or inject it directly into my veins. So it is, like I said, it's one of my absolute favorite movies in the world. I almost never watch it
Hmm.
because I love it so much
Hmm.
that I don't want to dilute its power or its hold over me. So I
Hmm.
only watch it every couple of years. And we watched it again, just for this podcast. And um, so my husband Russell and I saw this at a press screening before it came out.
Oh, that's so
And when it
cool.
was over, I said, "Did you like it?" And he said, "I don't know. I spent the whole movie looking at you because you were like," and we were watching it last night, and I turned to him and I said, "Does it hold up?" He said, "Yeah, all night you're doing." So I guess it does. I'll tell you a quick. This is how I knew I married right.
Hmm.
So we went to a press screening, as I said, and at the end they were giving out these Rocketeer badges, and there were a lot of kids in the press screening because they had it in the afternoon. And I was so enthralled and so enraptured by this picture that Russell pushes aside hordes of little children, stomping over them to get me a Rocketeer button, which I still have. So,
Aw, that's
yes.
so fantastic. Oh my goodness, this movie. 1991, good time for movies. It's directed by Joe Johnston, who I guess a lot of people would say he's kind of Spielberg light in a lot of senses, where he's following that tradition of like the 90s Spielberg, where it's this childlike wonder to a certain extent. But for those that don't know, he's the same director as Captain America, the First Avenger. And when you see these two movies, oh my goodness, does that make sense?
Yes, Rocketeer is a much better movie. I mean,
Much
I
better
like I
movie.
like Captain America fine. He also made the only good Jurassic Park movie, which is Jurassic Park 3. I think almost all of them
Wow.
are turkeys except for that one. And another really terrific movie with Jake Gyllenhaal called Rocket Boys, which is just splendid.
I forgot he did that movie. I loved that movie growing up
That's a
as a
great movie.
kid.
Yeah, yeah,
Beautiful film. So he has this sense of wonder that he's
yeah.
able to bring, and it is full of all these different influences. Just quick overview of the plot. Also, I should say, this is the first time I've actually seen it from end to end. I'd seen clips, I had seen part of it, and because Timothy Dalton plays the villain, Neville Sinclair.
Never
Oh my
Sinclair.
goodness, Dalton is my favorite Bond.
Oh, is he really?
So Connery is always going to be like this mythic, untouchable deity of the Bond franchise. But I think
Okay.
once we get to like normal Bond person levels, Dalton is the next one up. Like
All
he's
right.
just of the actors, I think he brings the most Fleming-like character to it. And honestly, this is my hot take. He is better in this movie than in either of his James Bond
So
films.
we were saying that last night. It's like, he's really better. So I think he's a much better villain than he is a hero. Um, and this part, it's almost the exact same performance that he gives in Flash Gordon, because it's the same part, really. um, and I was also shocked seeing it again, that he's not by any stretch of the imagination classically handsome, but he's giving a great imitation of someone who's classically handsome.
Hmm.
With a little Errol Flynn mustache, and he still looks really rough around the edges, like he did also in Flash Gordon, but he really pulls it off. I don't think somebody who, was better looking, not that we're talking about, but I think, if they gotten somebody more classically handsome, if they had made that movie 10 years later and it was Jude Law, for
Hmm.
example, I'm just pulling this
Yeah.
out of thin air, I don't think it would have worked
Hmm.
quite as well. And it was only when we were talking about it, I realized that there's a joke in his name. Neville Sinclair, spelt differently, is a character in a Sherlock Holmes story, the man with the twisted lip, who is
Oh.
in disguise.
Hmm.
And I never realized it. I don't know if that was actually intentional or if I'm reading deep things into this, but that is there's a sort of Sherlock Holmes joke in there. But this whole
Hmm.
movie is filled with echoes of other things.
Okay, this entire film is filled with echoes of other things. I didn't realize. So one thing I read in the trailer. Okay, we'll get basic overview of plot. So I've got the Wikipedia summary here, and we'll kind of take some of these bits and then talk about what highlights from this parts. So it is set in 1938 Los Angeles, and gangsters from Eddie Valentine's gang steal a prototype rocket pack from aviation magnate Howard Hughes. During their escape, the pursuing police shoot down the GBZ monoplane, which Cliff Secord, our hero, our plucky adventurer, he's flying this so they can be ready for the regional air contest. Also, as I'm watching this movie, I was taking meticulous notes for, oh, this would be a good idea in a Mitch Mayhew story. And I'm like, he is like does an aviation race. That would be a good one. And just little things like that. But so the feds are the ones that shoot down his plane. And this starts something that I loved about this movie, which is every scene leads into the next scene.
There's
Every
no
like
fat.
there's no fat. There is a complete each prompt, each second sets up the next. The screenplay is so tight. I was like, "Oh, this is what movies were. This is 1990s movies." And maybe I'm biased, and I know not all of them were this way, but when I think of like a good screenplay, I think of films like this.
It's an unbeatable screenplay. It's absolutely terrific. I love it. If I was going to tell you why I loved it, if I was just going to jump in,
Hmm.
is that it has this sort of sun-kissed grandeur to it. I mean, so many comic book movies or even adventure films are either dark or gritty,
Hmm.
and this is just cheery and sunny, and it's this sort of glorious lost California of orange
Hmm.
groves and open spaces and the possibility of adventure. And I think the fact that it doesn't take place in New York, it doesn't take
Hmm.
place in Gotham City, it doesn't take place in San Francisco. It sort of takes place in lovely Southern California
Yeah.
before it was ruined. Gives it this sort of magical vibe. You almost expect the Little Rascals to be somewhere in the background watching him do this. And there's an innocence and a
Hmm.
charm to it that I think a lot of movies don't have. When this came out, this came out the same summer as Terminator 2.
Oh,
And I'd
wow.
written something like 4 articles for different magazines, like Film Facts and Scarlet
Hmm.
Street and Wonder Magazine, saying, do not waste your time on Terminator 2. Go see The Rocketeer. Nobody listened, of course, but it's just it's so against the ethos of movie making,
Hmm.
maybe even for the last 30 years, which is
Hmm.
let's be grim and gritty, when this is sort of sunny and fun. And I think the perfect feel good movie. They
I
should they
agree.
should hand this out on suicide hotlines. Like, here, just watch this.
Okay, so this movie reminds me a lot of Indiana Jones, and I can see why this came in the midst of like the era that this movie came out is a
Mhm.
lot of the same time as Dick Tracy, The
Mhm.
Shadow, The Phantom, all of these films that were like, oh, Batman was big. Let's
Yeah.
do another superhero, let's do something pulpy. Indiana Jones was still big because I think around this point is when because I remember that The Last Crusade is technically a 90s movie, if I remember right.
1989.
1989. So it's like literally we're at the Indiana Jones is
Yeah.
still the big thing.
Oh yeah.
This film has more of like a Last Crusade and Raiders vibe in a lot of senses,
Uh-huh.
where take out like that film I think has horror elements that are in the midst of the adventure. I feel like this one has superhero elements in the midst of the adventure, but it still has that pulp serial vibe that was it. It's not. Is it Dan Stevens? The guy that wrote the original comic book, Dave
Oh,
Stevens.
Dave Stevens. Yeah,
Dave
great
Stevens.
guy.
I think he managed to capture that pulp serial vibe so beautifully in his comic
Yeah.
book that it just has this brightness that carries over into the film.
So one of the reasons I love it so much is ever since I was a kid, I've been obsessed with the 30s.
Hmm.
Because when I grew up in the 70s during the Great Nostalgia Revival. So
Hmm.
everything old was new again. So they
Wait,
were reprinting the
Scott,
Doc Savage. Yeah.
I have to ask, as a man who grew up in the 70s, does that mean that you appreciate the 70s revivals that are starting to like seep into the cultural milieu today?
No,
Or
because the 70s didn't mean anything to me when I was growing up. I was growing up in the 1930s. So, no, seriously. So, Friday nights they would play movie serials. They would play Tom Mix and they would play Flash Gordon. And the first movie serial I saw was Buck Rogers, which they were playing at night. And they were making movies like Hearts of the West and W.C. Fields and Me and Nickelodeon and
Mhm.
What's Up Doc, which was contemporary but had this 30s vibe. And the Doc Savage novels were coming out again, and the Mike Kaluta Shadow comics were coming out,
Hmm.
and it was very possible. And I'm a living example of this that you could grow up in the 70s and have just spent all of your time in the 1930s. And I think where I think this is better than Indiana Jones
Hmm.
before the world opens up on me is that the the period setting for Indy,
Hmm.
even though it's Nazis and he's wearing fedoras and he's aping the Alan Ladd from China look,
Hmm.
um, it's a very light period feel. I mean, there are
Yes.
almost never contemporary references
Hmm.
and if you look at and I know it's not a Spielberg film, but if you look at Dial of Destiny, for example,
Hmm.
which is 1969, and Last Crusade, which is 1938, aside from current events, they look like the same time.
Yeah.
It's sort of timeless. And the Rocketeer is very specifically October 1938. I mean,
Yes.
they're listening to Fibber McGee on the radio,
Hmm.
and they're making pop culture references like King Kong and Frankenstein, and they're listening to period music.
Hmm.
There's a reason my favorite Indiana Jones movie is the first 15 minutes of the last of Temple of Doom, because it actually looks like
Oh,
1935.
that's true.
Yes. The rest of the movie, but I mean, I look. Well, that's actually my favorite of the indie movies. But that's my
Hmm.
favorite part of it because it looks like the 30s, and this whole thing looks exactly like the 30s. And I think that might have been what made it a hard sell, because
Hmm.
by and large, I don't think people are interested in the past.
Yeah.
And indie is timeless. I mean, 1969,
Hmm.
1930 looks exactly the same. And the world almost looks exactly the same. So I'm not. I think it's aggressive
Hmm.
sense of nostalgia and its very aggressive sense of time and place might have hurt it because most people aren't interested in anything older than the milk in their fridge. You
Yeah.
know, and
Well, and in fairness, I think I've talked about this a little bit when I picked the specific time Mitch Mayhew's the first book, even though I don't give a date in my head, it's 1927. The reason I
really,
chose that was specifically because it's enough time after the war, but it's also at the edge of things are changing. And it's that World War I really reshifted the entire way that the world looked.
Mhm.
and down to political systems. But what we recognize the world as is basically that just around 1942, I would say, like theoretically,
Mhm.
in terms of time, history, culture, etc., we recognize that more as, oh, that was old, but that's still recognizable to quote unquote America. In a
Yeah.
way that once we get past like 1938, we watch The Rocketeer and the clothes look so different in a lot of
Mhm.
senses. The ways that people lived their lives and did just went about business
Yeah.
is different than we live today, which has this powerful feel of like you're walking into a different world. I loved this movie is a commentary in some senses on storytelling. We're talking about pop culture references. Neville Sinclair is supposed to be like the biggest Hollywood star at the time. He's like the number three box office draw.
That's very good, actually.
And he's like the and then Valentine's like number three asshole or something like that, and he like throws something at the wall. Great moments. But it has this commentary on this is the way movies were made back then, and we're making a movie now that has these moments. Like that whole set piece where we have Neville's movie, The Laughing Bandit,
Yes, which is
is
obviously Robin Hood.
Robin Hood. It's
Yeah.
so good. Like I love the amount of the glee and the joy in making this. And from what I saw I was looking over trivia for this movie before we started recording. Dave Stevens said a lot of the production design was literally them going, "Oh, this is in the comic book. Let's just make it."
Yeah.
And so
It's a
he
very close adaptation, except for some glaring changes. It's a very close adaptation.
so I haven't read the comic book. I've only seen like stills and like a basic outline. What are some of the changes that they did?
So in
Obviously,
the
I know
comic,
Jenny is different
yeah,
than Betty Page, but
right,
or yeah.
which for obvious reasons. So in the comic, it's not Howard Hughes, it's Doc Savage,
Okay, that's so
which
cool.
makes a lot of sense. So it's Doc Savage's Rocket Pack, which makes a great deal of sense. Neville Sinclair isn't really part of it.
Hmm.
Um, there is a moment that they scripted, and you'll actually see it in comic adaptations of the novel. And I don't know if they actually filmed it, but when he's heading to the South Seas Club, he flies past Grauman's Chinese Theater, and supposedly he's supposed to have a rocket malfunction, and he lands in the cement at Grauman's Chinese Theater, and Betty Davis takes a pen and writes the Rocketeer on it before he flies away. And I have no idea if that was shot or not, but what a glorious moment that would have been. But it's really close. Doc and Ham
Hmm.
instead of the feds are after Cliff. So the tall guy and the short guy who are the FBI in the movie are Ham and Monk in the
Okay.
graphic novel, and Doc shows up, and so it's really a fantasia of 30s influences, but it's really close, and Stevens loved it. I only met him once or twice, and he was really sweet. And I went to meet him at a convention in New Jersey, and I'm young. I'm younger than you are now when I did this, and I had taken all of my Rocketeer stuff for him to sign because I was just besotted by this thing, and um, and then while I was there, I was like buying all of this stuff, and when it came time to pay, like I have my and I'm like counting out the dollar bills, and he looked at me like I'm a complete stranger, and he said, "Dude, do you have enough money to get home?" I said, "Well, I should." And he said, "Why don't you just take this?" I'm like, "Okay." So I, I'm sure he's in heaven now.
That's
I mean, what a
amazing.
sweet man. Yeah.
Uh, One of the other big notes I had is okay, I love the line where so Billy's like Billy's the actor. When
Yeah.
Cliff says, I'll borrow it. And PV's like, when you borrow something without telling anyone, it's called stealing. This has just such wonderful, like, little lines and moments like that. I've seen Alan Arkin mostly in things where he's just old, like
Uh-huh.
old in the last like decade. I think he's passed away since.
Yeah. Just recently. Yeah.
Just recently. This was probably one of the younger roles I've seen him in, and I don't recognize as Alan Arkin. Like this film is filled with amazing character actors, and that
Terrific.
was one of my main notes was that Jennifer Connelly is the standout of, oh, she's the one that's like the big star that you would recognize. But even at the
I
time.
think she gives a better performance than Campbell.
I 100% agree. I have
Yeah.
that as one of my notes here is that like when she does her whole thing where she gets some great moments when she's kidnapped by Sinclair, she just acts so well. And you're like, oh, that this is why she went on to be the big
Yes. Oh,
Oscar
she's
winner.
luminescent. She's just lovely. Yeah.
And but the really, again, this is such a set piece of
Yeah.
character actors where everyone is a great performer, just reading good lines, delicious dialogue. um, Dalton is hamming it up and just
Yeah.
chewing the scenery in every moment he's in. The scene where he plays Laughing Bandit and he just overhears the conversation between Jenny and Cliff, and he's like peering again.
Yeah.
It's this film taking advantage of he's trying to find the rocket. He overhears them on set by coincidence, by accident, hearing this. And one writing piece of advice I heard once was use accident to your advantage because
Right.
it's that moment. Story is with a cross section between incident and accident. And they use that so beautifully in just that moment to showcase he now has the breadcrumb to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. Just about Alan Arkin. He was actually not the first choice.
Oh, really?
They wanted Lloyd Bridges,
Oh.
who turned it down, probably smartly as it was a big flop. But and Peavy in the comics looks like Lloyd Bridges, so I'm sure that's what they were going for. But I actually think that Arkin almost carries the whole thing away in his
Hmm.
back pocket. I mean, there's this wonderful moment where Cliff says, "Well, I know you haven't had a date in 5 years." He goes, "Oh yeah, Rosa Coletti," and it was just you don't need to date after that. It was just
It's
he's
a
just
lifetime of dating.
yeah, and he's wonderful. I think Terry O'Quinn
Hmm.
as Howard Hughes
Okay,
is
so
just
question.
splendid.
He does a fantastic job. There's a moment where I'm like, are they because like I've heard people talk about Howard Stark is like the combination of Walt Disney and Howard
Howard
Hughes.
Hughes, yeah,
I felt a lot like this is kind of a Walt Disney expression in some degree. Maybe that's just because I'm not as familiar with Howard Hughes, but just the way that he walks in the room, he talks, he acts. It made me think of Tom Hanks in Saving Mr. Banks in a lot of
yeah,
senses.
yeah. The sort of visionary businessman, but who also still has retained a sense of wonder. My absolute favorite moments in the movie both have Howard Hughes. Um, in the beginning, it's an absolute throwaway. They think the rocket is destroyed, so he's destroying the plans. And when he throws it on the fireplace, there's a mock-up of a cover for the 1939 World's Fair guidebook.
Yes.
Now, if you look at the actual 1939 World's Fair guidebook, it looks exactly like that, except for the rocket men on it. And I was, this is one of those moments where Russell said, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And then, of course, there's the great Nazi cartoon,
Yes. Okay. Okay.
which is glorious.
It's glorious, but I also sat there going, this looks so much like Disney animation. It's
Yeah,
vaguely disturbing because you just
yeah,
see like Disney standard type of animation, but covered in swastikas. And you're like,
yeah, yeah.
oh, this is like the alternate comic book universe where it's like America with
The
the
dark
Nazis.
Disney.
Yeah,
Yes.
the dark version of Disney.
And then, of course, when Cliff escapes, that thing that he jumps on, that's a
Yes.
mock-up of the Spruce Goose, which was Howard Hughes's, big failed aviation project failed. And when he says, "Well, son of a bitch, it does fly," because it only flew once in actuality, because it was too big. It was sort of like it was built along the lines of a jet before
Hmm.
jet technology. So they were using props. And
Hmm.
it's you could see his face. It's like, oh, wow. And the whole movie is just full of wow
Hmm.
moments where everyone is saying wow. And it's if you're a big movie buff like we are, you watch the air show stuff and you say, "Oh,
Hmm.
well, it's like Test Pilot, or it's like Too Hot to Handle, or any of those great Metro movies, about aviation." And it has this weird feel of a mix between like an MGM classic and a Disney movie.
Hmm.
And again, it's so sunny and so it's absolutely it's irresistible. I want to go watch it again.
To that note, one of my favorite scenes in the film was when they go to the diner after. So Jenny and Cliff go on a date, and they go back to the Bulldog Diner, and they're talking. Cliff and the guys on like the diner counter are like critiquing the movie and how
Yeah.
they display aviation. I'm like, oh, movie criticism then and now are kind of the same. That's amazing.
All of those people, and again, you were talking about how perfectly this is cast. I mean, even the background pilots,
hmm
who don't significantly do much of anything, are just I
One
I
of the
just
guys I'm watching, I'm like, that's Daryl. That's Larry. That's
oh
Larry
of
from
Larry and Daryl. Yes.
Larry, Daryl, and Daryl in Newhart. I'm like, oh, that is incredible.
Yeah.
Just again, lovely to see these actors who just do a great job showing up and
Yeah.
doing their thing,
Yeah.
doing their thing.
Yeah. And if I could get like deep into nerddom for a minute.
Please do. What else
So
is this show for?
so like everyone says, or a lot of people say, well, this has a real pulp vibe. And
hmm
I think, the Indiana Jones movies have a real pulp vibe. And even though it's based on a comic strip, The Phantom
hmm
has a real pulp vibe, which is actually a pretty good movie. Not as good as this, but it's a pretty good movie. And The Shadow, of course, has one, which is sadly, it looks great, but that's the only thing it has going for it. But I think that this movie has a real old time radio vibe more than a
Yes, it
pulp vibe
does. Yes.
because it feels and it sounds like Tailspin Tommy
hmm
or Smiling Jack or things like that. In that pulps tend to be more violent and more gritty
hmm
and more sweeping.
hmm
And old time radio serials, particularly old time radio serials for kids, had a small town vibe
hmm
with big things happening there.
hmm
And it really felt more like radio to
Well, it's a
me.
mystery too. Like
And it's
that's
a
the thing.
mystery.
This one does a great job of it. Each puzzle piece kind of falls in. You know right from the get-go that the gangsters want the rocket pack. You know that the FBI wants the rocket pack. You know that Neville wants the gangsters to get the rocket pack, but
Yeah.
he's not above going and trying to get it himself. Lothar, oh my goodness.
Yes.
I was like this menacing, like he's made up to look like a cartoon character, and he just does such a great job of being menacing at the
Well,
right
he's actually
moments.
made up to look like a famous actor.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. So Lothar is a double joke. So Lothar is the name of Mandrake the magician's sidekick. Um,
Oh.
but also there is a very famous actor, very famous, obviously not that famous, so you didn't know him. There's a well-known character actor from the 40s named Rondo Hatton who
Okay.
had acromegaly, and that's exactly what he looked like. And he played a character called the Creeper in a whole bunch of movies like House of Horrors and Pearl of Death, where he would
Oh,
break your back to kill
yes.
you.
I heard about this on the Borjo's Pass podcast that show guest Jim Towns does. I heard
Uh,
the episode on the Creeper. That makes sense.
so this guy is the Creeper, who they never
Oh.
and he's made up to look. So when this is over, if you pull up a picture of Rondo Hatton, you'll go, oh my God, it's Lothar. And there are like 8 people in every audience who go, oh wow, it's Rondo Hatton. But it's just another one of those jokes that are just like in the weeds. And he's such a great character, and they're actually true to what he does because in
hmm
Pearl of Death, which is actually a Sherlock Holmes movie where he's the villain, he breaks people's backs, and in House of Horrors, he breaks people's backs. He's always the henchman of some master criminal. Um, so yeah, when I first started, I turned to Ross. I said, oh, "It's Rondo Hatton." He said, "Who?" I said, "You know, Rondo Hatton. Where have you been?" So
Okay, another point that I noted just for shout outs for actors that you don't realize are in this movie. The gal that plays Jan Levinson, I wish I had actually pulled up her real name, is the singer in the South Seas Club.
oh really?
From
Okay.
The Office, the gal that Michael
Yeah.
dates, who used to work for like the corporate and then becomes like a toxic relationship for him, that actress is the singer. And I was like, that's so cool.
I had never seen The Office, so I didn't know. But okay, wow. The whole South Seas
Oh, it's such a
section of the
great set
movie
piece.
is glorious, and she does a great job singing "Begin to Begin."
Hmm.
And it's curious that John Stone's other retro superhero film also has a musical number. I mean, because there's a musical number in Captain America,
Oh, that's
which is
right.
the
Yeah.
highlight of the movie. And I think, I think the Begin to Begin is one of the highlights of the movie. So and I think actually the Anything Goes bit is one of the highlights in all of Indiana Jones. So we need
I
an adventure movie that's a musical.
Okay, you know what? There is a point where I think that would be terribly entertaining because who other than Disney? I've often said Hercules, the Disney movie, is basically just Superman the movie, except it's animated and uses Greek myth.
Yeah.
Why can't we have like an animated Indiana Jones movie, but with a different character name, like just retro it a little bit, like they did
I,
Hercules, and make it a
yeah.
musical? I would go see it.
I would pay good money for that.
You've
We
got
may
two
be the
tickets, Disney, two
we may be
tickets
the only
already.
two people though who so that's the problem. I mean, we may, and I think that's also
Four
part of the
tickets. We would
problem with
drag our spouses.
yes, but I think that's part of the problem with why the Rocketeer underperformed. I mean, it was made for a really
Hmm.
small audience. I was talking. I hate when I do this, but I was talking to Joe Dante once, and we were talking about Matinee, which I
Hmm.
adore, and he liked it a lot, and it was a big flop, as you know. And he said that movie really taught me a lesson. And I said, "What?" He said, "Well, don't make a very expensive movie for 17 people." And I think sadly that was a problem with Dave Stevens
Hmm.
because he, like me, was really cued into the 30s. I mean, that's the way his
Hmm.
head worked.
Hmm.
And I think it limited his art
Hmm.
because, you know, he's speaking then to a very small audience, and it's a trap that Indiana Jones avoided. It's like we
Hmm.
said it in the 30s, but we said it really lightly, as opposed to ground it there
Hmm.
in like every aspect of the movie and the plot is part of the decade.
Well, and that's
Um,
something we've talked about a couple of times on the show with various guests. Indiana Jones, for whatever reason, it's like the only thing of like the adventure that think of all the Indiana Jones ripoffs that have been made. The only one other than Indiana Jones, I'd argue, that has like been commercially successful and stuck around in the consciousness was The Mummy.
yeah, I
Besides
love the Mummy.
that, okay, and that's my only like major thing where I'm like, this film is at a 9 for me. The only thing that would make it a 10 is if we had Brendan Fraser as the Rocketeer, which I'm saying Billy Campbell is fantastic. His innocence and his just wide-eyed aw shucks. He
Yeah.
does what actually I was thinking about because I just watched the new Superman movie. He has a very Clark Kent vibe
Oh
where
yeah.
he's like that kind of good old American boy sensibility, which is great and it works. But there's that moment I'm like 90s Brendan Fraser
Yeah.
in that.
But he's also endearingly bumbling. Like, how often is
Yes.
he hitting himself in the head, or things are falling on him, or
Okay.
he accidentally pulls off the rudder of the airship. I mean,
I had a joke here where I wrote down if you want to get drunk watching this movie, take a shot every time Cliff has to hide the rocket pack because that is a great like
yeah.
thing that is a trope in the movie that every time he shows up somewhere he has to hide the thing and then he
Hmm.
has to find it again.
Yeah. I'll tell you a quick Billy Campbell story. So I'm in a bar downtown back when I lived in New York, called Julius's. It was Julius's, yeah. And I walk out, and I don't know if he walked out at the same time or if he was walking down the block, but as I step out, there's Billy Campbell. And this is after The Rocketeer, and I had a copy of Dracula in my pocket because I was prepping to write a book about Dracula for the 100th anniversary of Dracula in 1997.
Oh
So
wow,
this is
that's
like
cool.
1996. And I walk out, I'm like, oh, it's Billy Campbell. So I'm walking down the block looking at, and he stops to look in the window of a bookstore. So of course, me shy, I go, oh, Billy Campbell, the Rocket. And we're chatting for a minute. And then he was very, very sweet. He was wearing a beret of all things. And he walks away. And after he leaves, I said, wait a minute, I have a copy of Dracula in my pocket. I should have had him sign it. And then when I got to doing the book, I had contacted a whole bunch of people to see if they would write little notes for it. Not blurbs, but sort of like, you know, 8 or 10 paragraph reminiscences of working in
Hmm.
Dracula films. And
Oh,
it
that's
was,
cool.
yeah, and I got like Francis Lederer, which was amazing because he had to be like 109. And John Waters actually graciously said, I would love to do this, but I don't have anything to say. I said, I don't care, make it up. He said, no, no, you're very sweet, but no. But so Billy Campbell said yes. So I'm on the phone with him and I said, tell me about, doing Dracula. And he said, well, Bob, have you ever acted with an appliance glued to your face? And I'm thinking to myself, what makes him think I acted with anything or ever had anything glued to my face? But it was, I said, well, no, I can't say I have. He said, well, it's like acting with a popsicle stick on your top lip. I'm like, so he's actually just like Cliff. He's really, really, really sweet. I'm sorry to say he's the only weak link in the
Hmm.
picture because the sweetness is there, but there's nothing particularly compelling.
Hmm.
And I think if that was, it's very funny because when we were watching it again, Russell said, who could they have gotten instead of him? Um, and I never thought of Brendan Fraser. That would have been great because he has charm and goofiness, and I think he probably would have been better. Yeah, you're
Hmm.
right.
I was looking at there was the list of like these were the alternate actors they were talking about. And like Dennis Quaid was one of them,
Oh, that would have been interesting.
who would have been interesting. Like I think that he kind of does the similar vibe. Like if we were remaking The Rocketeer, I'd honestly pick his son. The
Oh,
he
yeah,
come on, what's his name? His last name's Quaid. But yeah, he's Huey in The Boys.
yeah.
And he just has that aw shucks.
Mhm.
He voices Superman in My Adventures with Superman.
Oh, does he really? Okay.
Yeah, I think that he has that right kind of vibe for how he sounds and how he
Mhm.
acts. He's a little skinny, but like I still think that he'd do a great job in the
Yeah.
role.
Well, so I mean, he's not a superhero. He's a
Hmm.
he's a doofus with a rocket
Yeah.
pack, and that's
Oh
I
wait,
and I
wait. This is America. Like America in the 30s and
yeah
40s. If you want a picture of what America post World War II was, it's a doofus with a rocket pack is
yeah
essentially
exactly yeah.
that.
And that's another thing I think that hurt the movie. I mean, I think people were looking for a superhero movie, and
Hmm.
it was about the guy, and it wasn't about the rocket pack.
Hmm.
And again, it's always expectations. Like, what were people expecting from this? And I think they were expecting, thrill rides.
Hmm.
And it's not a thrill ride. It's a
No,
Valentine.
it is. And it's a good mystery. Again, I
Yeah.
love the fact that each one of the set pieces we walk through, we gain more of a we're searching for at the beginning, we're opened with what is going on. And every step through the film, we get a little bit of that filled in more and more. And I think that's part of why, like when Jenny gets kidnapped and she's at Sinclair's, which I wrote down another line I really like that she said, do you have to drug all your women to seduce them? Wow, but that's a line that ages kind of
Well,
like
hey,
there
yes, like milk. Yeah.
they just like milk. But the set design in his home is amazing, and apparently, like that's an actual home that exists in Hollywood that they used. She like discovers that he's actually the Nazi spy and all
Right.
this stuff,
And there's a secret room.
and she acts so well in it. And
Yes.
I love that the moment he like revives her, he's like, I too am kidnapped. They're blackmailing me. And she's acting so well where you're like, is she playing along? Is
Yeah.
she actually starting to believe him? And then she like
Yeah.
knocks him on the head. I love it. It's so
Yeah.
good.
She also she calls him out when he's quoting movies that he was in. She says, "Oh, you said
Yes.
that to Garbo. Oh, you said," and you can see he's like he's doing his best not to be pissed off. It's like,
He just
yeah,
picks
but you would
another
have been
line.
great. Yes, it's just let me try something else. But I
It's
think the only misstep in the movie actually is he says this is like again into the weeds of nerddom. When he's talking to Eddie, he said, "I want a rocket." It's like the comic books, and this is 1938, so it should
yeah.
have been like the comic strips. Now that tells you that either I have no private life or I spend too much time thinking about things that I shouldn't be thinking about. But it should have been. It should have been comic strip. And, we were talking about radio before. so many of the beats of the
Hmm.
movie are from radio serials as opposed to
Hmm.
movie serials because it was like it's radio serials were adventure stories that were also mysteries. And we were talking
Hmm.
about how this is more a mystery, unlike movie serials, which were just adventure stories.
Hmm.
And they would always incrementally give you information in like 15-minute bits in old time radio. So it's like, okay, so Neville Sinclair's a baddie. All right, Neville Sinclair knows gangsters. All right, Neville Sinclair wants a rocket. All right, Neville Sinclair's a Nazi. All right, Neville Sinclair. And as you were saying, everything in there has to pay. Like they're in the movies in the
Hmm.
beginning, and there's the airship, and they say it's making its tour of California, and then what happens at the end? There's an airship. You know, this
Okay.
is the perfect movie. It's got Nazis and airships
Yes.
and Rondo Hatton and a musical number. What more do you want?
Okay. I also love there's a line where Timothy Dalton says, "You'll make a fortune."
A
When he
fortune.
has to, when he's going to pay him, he's like, "Good, because I have a club to repair." After
Yes,
he's
and an
there,
also to plug.
Cliff has gone through and destroyed the entire
Yeah,
club with the
yeah.
rocket pack. Which, okay, that was another comment I had here, which is that the effects, I think, much like with the Mummy, where the effects have aged, but they
Mhm.
aged in a charming way where I don't watch and go, "Oh, that looks so bad." Instead, like there's some obvious green screen, kind of
Right.
blue screen, something like that going on, but it doesn't look so obnoxiously bad that it takes me out of the movie. It just looks like, "Oh, that was
It
an
looks
effect at the
charming.
time." It's
Yeah,
charming.
yeah. I feel that way about Harryhausen movies. I mean, like
Hmm.
people say, "Oh, thank God we have CGI." I'm like, no, I will take stop motion over CGI any day because it looks fun, and CGI doesn't really look like anything. But yeah, I'll tell you about. So it seems like I have a story for everything. It's Thanksgiving Day, 1991, the end of 1990, and I go into. I was living on like right around the corner from the Dakota in New York,
Hmm.
and I go into a deli to get something because we're on our way to see our in-laws for Thanksgiving. And who steps into the deli but Paul Sorvino? And I go, Paul Sorvino, you're in the Rock. It's like I said, you're like it's one of my favorite movies in the world. He said, "Thank you very much." It was like Getaway Kid, and I said, "This, how come it wasn't a success?" And he looked at me like with the Paul Sorvino stink eye, and he said, "It was a big hit in Japan, kid."
That's incredible. Well, I can 100% see this film being much larger in international audiences in a lot of
Yeah,
senses.
yeah, because it feels American
Hmm.
in ways that Americans don't actually recognize. But people overseas go, "Oh yeah, that's America."
Hmm.
Or that's the America they want. I mean,
Yeah.
it's Andy Hardy and the superhero.
I would 100% make the argument that much like the way that we have used the Western to like codify and retell the story of America's past,
Uh-huh.
this feels like a retelling of America
Oh
in
yeah,
the 1930, in specifically 1938, and it captures that so well. But I think you're right. For whatever reason, that particular era, America thinks in terms of our collective consciousness of what our history is. We have there is a this is what would be the drunk history version of it. We go from the Revolution to Civil War, and those were like right next to each other because obviously Abraham Lincoln and George Washington knew each other. And then we leap to maybe World War One, but more likely go, oh, there's a Great Depression, and then there's World War Two. And that's like the extent of like what the average American thinks of as America's past, I think. Granted,
yeah.
I'm putting words in the collective consciousness
No, no,
mouth,
that's fine.
but I think that that's probably a pretty fair estimate.
So so Howard Hughes throws his plans into the fire, and it says the 1939 World's Fair. And I think in lots of ways, this movie's tied to the fair
Hmm.
because the fair was this moment of just absolute
Hmm.
unbridled optimism.
Hmm.
So they took the swamps of Queens, which was, I mean, it was all swampland at that time, and they built this paradise in it with the Trilon and the Perisphere. And they said, this is the world of tomorrow. And they had things like Futurama, where you would get in and it would take you around and you'd see the world of 1980. Sadly, it didn't work out that way. And they had all of these pavilions, and there, Johnny Weissmuller was appearing there, after Tarzan at the
Wow.
Aquacade. He was replaced by Buster Crabbe, oddly enough, and it was this gleaming Art Deco
Hmm.
futuristic paradise. And everybody, it's 1939. Everybody thinks we're out of the Depression, and that's where we are. And 1938, 1939 is and historically it turned out to be a very bad take. But 1938, 1939 is this moment of just like almost unparalleled optimism
Hmm.
in the nation. It's like, well, we've gotten over. I mean, it's hard for us to even conceive of what the Depression was like. I mean,
Hmm.
people were literally starving. I mean, today we have all of these social services, and it's really hard. It's really hard to starve in the United States right now. But it was easy in 1933.
Hmm.
And people who had money, suddenly found out that they didn't.
Yeah.
And middle class people suddenly found themselves really poor, and the dirt poor found themselves dying. So it was devastation in a way that we very comfortably in 2025
Hmm.
can imagine. And then 1938, it's all over. And not only is it all over, but we're making these great strides in aviation. We're
Hmm.
making these great strides in communication. I mean, they're already playing with television in 1939. And so everybody, you get to 1939, it's this cultural moment. It's not just a historic moment. It's a cultural moment where everyone says, we are on the cusp
Hmm.
of the great, big, beautiful new world, which was, I'm sure 1941 was, or 1939 in September, by the way, was a hideous wake up call.
Hmm.
But what the Rocketeer more than anything keys into is that somehow it managed to key into a national feeling that was felt 60 years before it was made
Hmm.
and still managed to reflect it perfectly. And movies to some extent are always a time machine.
Hmm.
You see a movie and you say, "Oh, I remember my life when I saw that," or you see a movie and you say, "Oh, I remember when the world was like that." But they're also time machines in that they can sometimes just perfectly catch something that had happened and was already gone. And I think the Rocketeer is one of those few instances where they got it letter perfect. It's
Hmm.
really it's made in 1991, but it's really 1938. And I at a really interesting time in our nation. There's a really good book by David Gerlenter,
Hmm.
who actually was a computer scientist. He's one of those guys who got blown up by the Unabomber. Most of his
Oh.
fingers were blown up. He's still alive, fortunately. And he wrote this book called 1939, The Lost World of the Fair. And it's
Ooh.
all about what America was like in 1938, 1939 when they were building this thing. And,
Hmm.
like if you talk to somebody on the street, they would say, yeah, the bad times are over. We're like on the cusp of paradise.
Hmm.
And you get that feeling like, yeah, we're right on the cusp of paradise. If we had rocket packs, this would be great.
I'm a big fan. I need to do more research on the World's Fair. I've always found like the just that concept fascinating. I have like four of the Chicago World's Fair posters on my wall just because I
Okay.
love the art style of it. And just it is this unique concept of something that I think that we've lost in a lot of senses, the sense of wonder, the sense of unbridled optimism, what the future holds. I think that The Rocketeer is a better Tomorrowland movie than Tomorrowland, which is
Oh,
another
yeah.
Disney flop.
Yeah.
I would much rather see this movie. Okay, so honest question, do you think The Rocketeer is a property that should be rebooted or a new film made, or should they just leave this is a perfect movie. Let's not try to mess with this again.
It depends on who makes it.
That's fair. Who do you
No,
think
no.
would make a good Rocketeer movie today?
Joe Johnston.
Well, that's
um, so it's so hard to do this without getting into the weeds and getting in trouble. We it's a it, there's this moment which is
Mhm.
played as a joke, but it's a serious joke where Cliff says to the gangster, Is he paying you in dollars or Deutschmarks? And the gangster pulls his gun and
Hmm.
says, I may not make a decent buck, but I'm 100% American. Now,
Hmm.
it's a gag and it's not a gag
Yeah.
because that was the. And right now, we make Superman movies where we can't say truth, justice in the American way.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure we can do it. And I don't know if you want me to do it. I'm available, but it would be it would. I think first off, it'd be a really hard sell
Hmm.
for people to see because we're not interested in retro. I can't think of any movies outside of Raiders and to
Yeah.
some degree the Mummy movies
Hmm.
that have been able to sell the past successfully. I mean,
It's
Dick
true.
Tracy underperformed,
Hmm.
Phantom underperformed, The Shadow underperformed. Um,
Yeah, actually, now I think about it, I'm trying to think through the only film that's portrayed the past that I know recently it's been critically successful was Sinners.
yeah,
With but that's also more of a horror movie in some senses, and
yeah,
those movies tend to the reality is horror movie, there's reason to keep making them because they make a lot of money for a
yeah,
fairly low budget. That film's probably
yes.
highest expense was the cast. Outside of that,
Or lunch.
yeah.
The catering was really expensive. Yeah, no, I was actually shocked that they were able to make it in 1991.
Hmm.
Because this is still think of the
Because also
historical
it's an
moment in
indie comic.
1991. Yeah. What?
If I remember right, The Rocketeer is an indie comic. It
It was an
wasn't
indie
done by
comic.
one
Yeah, it
of
was
the big.
no. I mean he couldn't give it away, Dave and Dave Stevens. And think of the cultural moment. This is right on the tail end of Batman, the
Hmm.
first Tim Burton movie, where everybody wanted dark and gritty.
Hmm.
And I'm not putting it down, but the bigger hit was Terminator 2,
Hmm.
not exactly Sammy Smiles of the movies. And I think that, I was just shocked that he was able to pull it off. We were talking about Captain America, the First Avenger. That's not nearly as good as
No,
this.
no.
And I think that's because, they were making all of these concessions to make it
Hmm.
less
Period.
locked in time.
Yeah.
And although I got to tell you, the last moment of Captain America, he wakes up and there's a cathedral radio playing,
Yeah.
and he thinks it's the 40s, and he goes outside and he steps into contemporary America. And I
Hmm.
turn to my husband, and he says, "Now he knows he's in hell." So, another thing about the Rock that I love is that his helmet is supposed to be
Hmm.
made from a radio,
Yes.
and it
Okay.
looks,
I great moment. Great moment in the movie.
yeah. Yeah, so I made this list of like junky things that I just wanted to mention that are silly.
Yes.
That was one of them. Um, Betty's girlfriend who's in the Robin Hood movie with her looks just like Una O'Connor, who's in who's in Robin Hood. And they can't, I
Yes.
mean, she's much prettier, but I mean, it's like, oh, yeah, yeah, they wanted somebody who looks like Una O'Connor. And then the guy who actually steals the vacuum cleaner at the beginning looks like, good heavens, it'll come to me in a minute. But his name is Wilmer, which
Hmm.
is the name of the Gunsel in the Maltese Falcon, Elijah Cook, and he looks like Elijah Cook. So it's
Hmm.
another callback. It's like, well, we have a guy who looks like Elijah Cook. We're going to name him the same name as somebody from the Maltese Falcon. We have a Una O'Connor cognate. We have an Errol Flynn cognate, and we have a Rondo Hatton cognate. So it's sort of like all of this stuff
Hmm.
just shows up in there, and the fact that they were true to the music. They could have had like some thudding hip hop score to this
Hmm. Oh, the
because it's
music is
1991.
amazing.
The
James
music's amazing.
Horner did
It's
a
it, it
fantastic job.
yeah, it's his best score, and it's filled with pop culture or
Hmm.
or, or, or pop music standards.
Hmm.
It has "When My Lover Is Gone," and they have when Cliff actually lands outside of the South Seas Club. There's a sign there, and I think it's for the Fred Waring Orchestra. And I'm like, what art director knows to put up a sign for the Fred Waring Orchestra. So it's just got these, and the policeman outside of Wilmer's room, they're listening to Fibber McGee and Molly.
Hmm.
And it's just it's so spot on that if you're a schnook like me, this is absolute. This is I, I'm going to hang up on you and watch it again. It's
What was your highlight in the rewatch? What was the specific thing that you'd say this was the thing that stood out to you most in seeing it again?
it has a sweetness
Hmm.
that's sorely missing.
I
And I
agree.
think we think that if something is sweet, it's either sappy
Hmm.
or it can't be an adventure.
Hmm.
And I don't think they're mutually exclusive. And it has a sweetness
Hmm.
that I think really sells it. And that's where Bill Campbell actually
She
shines.
shines.
I mean, like there's real sweetness there. I mean, if anybody should have played Superman,
Well, okay.
it's Bill Campbell. I mean,
I,
because
I was gonna
he's,
ask, did you see
yeah,
the new Superman movie yet?
alas, yes.
Okay, and but I think that one of the main criticisms people have right now is that it genuinely tries to have a more a lighter tone and more of a
Oh, my,
hopeful
yeah,
sense,
yeah.
which has not been recurrent within
Yeah.
most movies.
My problem with it wasn't the tone. I mean, the
Hmm.
tone was fine. My favorite actor was the dog. I mean, the dog was great, but um, uh, I just thought it was a mess.
Hmm.
I mean, it's got so the Rocketeer has one
Yes,
quarter of the
it,
plot
it's
of the
a
new
very
Superman movie.
linear plot,
Yeah,
whereas
I
I
mean,
heard
and
one
this was a
person
mess.
compare Superman to the new Superman movie to it's a Superman annual number like 5
Yes,
that you're just dropped into the middle of a comic book.
and you're like, what the hell? And there's this whole middle where he's in a pocket universe and he has to be saved by other people that you don't care about because you don't see them again. And I'm like, what the hell were they thinking? This needed to go through the typewriter, at
Hmm.
least typewriter. This needed to go through the word processor at least three more times, before somebody, said, this is good to go. You know, the the guy Corn Sweat or whatever his name
Hmm.
is actually quite good. But the movie, and not
Hmm.
for any particular reason, like, oh, I don't like this because it's not part of the Snyderverse, or I mean, like I don't care. It's not good because it's just not a good movie.
Hmm.
It's a total mess. You're sitting there in the middle and you're like, what's going on again? Like I have no idea what the hell is going on in this movie.
But I think that that's something where there aren't many films that are trying to have hope, I guess be a way,
Yes.
where an optimism actually is
Yeah.
probably a better sense of putting it. That is something that's sorely lacking in most movies today. We do have a cultural landscape that's far more let's get there's come on, what's the show? DuckTales
Oh
did
yeah, I used to
a
love DuckTales.
they did a new version which was actually trying to throw back more to like the comic art style, which I
Okay.
enjoyed. David Tennant voiced Scrooge McDuck, and he did a phenomenal job. But there's an episode where they're like, Darkwing Duck is being remade, and they get in this Christopher Nolan type director who's like, we will discover the id of Darkwing. At the end, he will fight himself. And it's like, okay, I love the fact that Disney is making fun of, or at least this show is making fun of
Yeah.
the let's take this light character and let's like bring within the inner conflict. Because James Bond did this, Jason Bourne did this. Every story of, well, I say every story, most stories within the last 2 decades
Yeah.
almost. Like
Oh, they did it to
honestly,
Indiana Jones.
most of the store movies made within my lifetime have been let's put the hero's main conflict within themselves instead of
Yeah.
having them actually fight Nazis or
Yeah.
some other external villain. And there's one other line from this movie I want to call out. I love when Timothy Dalton, he's about to escape the airship and he puts on the rocket pack and she looks at him and goes, "You lied to me the entire time." He's like, "I wasn't lying. I was acting."
Yes.
And then he launches off, and the moment they set up so beautifully, the rocket pack explodes because of the leak. And I just, oh, again, this movie, I adore it. Scott, for those who have not seen this movie and have listened to us ramble about it back and forth, what do you think is the number one pitch people need to see this movie because blank?
See the Rocketeer, it will make you happy.
I like that.
It will make you happy. Or see the Rocketeer, you will feel young again.
Oh,
Even if
so
you're young
relevant.
like you'll feel even younger.
Scott, this has been a blast to chat with the Rocketeer with you. Where can people go learn more about you, your work? And I just want to again shout out Targets West, amazing
Oh, what
book.
a
I
great
love
book.
it.
What a great
People
book.
need to, you want to feel happy and optimistic, read Targets West because it's a good old-fashioned thriller that feels like, again, I've talked a lot about the book. I love that it has a very Fleming feel, but American sensibility. And Lucas is a delightful character right from the get-go when he's like holding his hat on his lap because he's on an airplane. I'm like, I am there with you, buddy. I understand your pain.
Oh yes, yes. Hat people. It's well, where can people find me? I hang out on X or Twitter or whatever it's called these days at Scott McCrea West, or you can look me up online at scottmccrea.net and buy a book because Papa needs a pair of boots. No, wait, we're talking about the Rocketeer. Buy a book, Papa needs some spats.
Yes. We will
I was
link.
thinking about the other thing I was thinking is like Terrence is going to love this movie. It's a great hat movie. It's a good suit movie.
Hmm.
It's a high style movie. This is right up your
Oh,
alley.
it was gorgeous. I love the entire South Seas Club setting where everyone's dressed to the nines. I love that you have this whole sequence where Cliff is like hovering at the table
Yeah,
and
which is
Sinclair.
screwball comedy stuff.
Yes,
Yeah,
and it's done well. It doesn't feel like it's belaboring the point. Which I need to avoid belaboring the point. People just need to go check out this movie. Check out your work, Scott. Thank you again for joining us on the show.
thank you. Why are you coming apart? No, thank you so much.